let's just quickly look at positivism and its critique, which is the second last. So positivism we are already aware of. What exactly positivism is, when did it start, what are its core pointers, propositions, etc. Now quickly looking at some of the questions related to positivism. So shortfalls of positivist philosophy that gave rise to non-positivist methods of studying social reality. Phenomenological perspectives in sociology reject many of the assumptions of positivism. Examine the basic postulates of positivism and post-positivism. That's a good question. Explain ethnomethodological phenomenological perspectives as critique of positivism. And lastly, critically examine positivistic approach in sociology studies. Now, positivism we are already aware of. There are two works that you can always take a note of. Comte wrote two phenomenally sort of hefty, heavy books. One is called The Course in Positive Philosophy, and the other is called A General View of Positivism. And if you're going back to Comte defines positivism in the following words. He says, the first characteristic of positive philosophy is that it regards all phenomena as subject to natural laws. So that's the definition. You also have Jonathan Turner, J.H. Turner, who says positivism is the name for the scientific study of the social world. You can stop here, right? That's a very apt, quick definition. So basically, positivism, and also students very often think, is positivism to do with positive thinking? Not really. Why is it that they've used the word positive, or the derivative is there? Positivism is kind of positive because it represents an optimistic belief in human beings' ability to figure things out and improve their circumstances. So positivism believes in that ability of the human beings, that they will be able to figure things out for themselves and they will be able to improve their circumstances. So that's positivism. That's the positive part. Now, some of the important propositions of positivism: possible to create a science of society based on the same principles and procedures as in the natural sciences. Development of invariable laws, suggesting that the behavior of man is governed by the principle of cause and effect. So something that we have already discussed. Human behavior can be objectively measured and quantified, just like weight, temperature, pressure. Measurement, they say, is essential to explaining human behavior. And they also very clearly point out that only that behavior is worth studying that can be directly observed, right? So meanings, feelings, etc., they are not important. They're just not important. If we start looking into feelings, then we will not be able to, positivists say, we will not be able to formulate laws around cause and effect. So that's something that they are making a case for. Now, what is the criticism? Basically, the first criticism, so if we are talking about positivism and we are looking at criticisms, so the first criticism is this claim to certainty. So this idea that what we are saying is, what we are claiming is certainly true. So this claim to certainty is kind of a problem. So articulating scientific knowledge is one thing. That is one thing. But claiming that scientific knowledge is utterly objective, that only scientific knowledge is valid, certain and accurate, this is a completely different thing. And this is something that scholars do not really, they don't really find very agreeable a proposition. Positivism does not critically look at the role of the observer. The role of the observer is very important, but positivism simply does not look at the role of the observer in the way in which social reality gets constituted. Positivists believe that everything can be measured and calculated, but because of that belief, they tend to be very inflexible, rigid, and orthodox. And this limits scope for any kind of creative engagement in their case. Also, society contains self-reflexive agents. Society is not like nature. So in that sense, when you are studying self-reflexive agents, you cannot really arrive at the right set of findings or arguments. But this is something that positivism does not really get into. Positivism's ethical neutrality, this idea that it is completely separated, that science is separated from moral and political issues, this has been questioned by the Frankfurt School. I'm sure the Frankfurt School, where you have Adorno, Horkheimer, and the rest, right? Then the postmodernists also question this foundational stature of science, and so basically positivism loses out on its conviction and power and legitimacy, and positivism also fails to distinguish between the natural and the social worlds. Now here we have a quick additional pointer which might be of great help. So what are the ways in which in sociology we make a difference between the social world and the natural world? So if we are talking about the social world on the one hand, and we are talking about the natural world on the other, what are the ways in which these are different? You never know, you can have a 10 marker on this. The difference between natural world and social world. Now, social world there are three differences that we can quickly refer to. Social world does not exist independently of the activities of the individuals. So basically, what it means is that the social world, it affects the way in which the individual, the agent, interacts with the social world. So the social world does not exist independently of the activities of the individual. The natural world exists independently of the activity of the individuals. Second point, social world does not exist independently of the agent's views. So the view that I hold has some bearing on my social world. So individuals reflect upon the social world in which they find themselves, and in accordance with that, they change, alter their behavior. This does not happen in relation to the natural world. Social world is shaped by the actions of agents and therefore keeps changing. That does not really happen in the case of the natural world. So that is one. So that's one possible framing that you can think about in the light of whatever has been asked over the years. This is a possible question, a short one, a short note. Then there is another possible question, which is about difference between natural science and social science, and we are looking at it sociologically. So this is social world, natural world. Then we say natural science and social science, right? Now, difference between natural science and social science, there are two ways in which I want you to look at it, and this is as sociological as anything under the sun. One is distinction on the basis of subject matter. So, subject matter. And the other is distinction on the basis of methods. So, distinction on the basis of subject matter. And so, distinction on the basis of subject matter, what does that mean? So, we refer to a very important philosopher, Neo-Kantian, Wilhelm Dilthey, D-I-L-T-H-E-Y. He contrasted the two, which is natural sciences and social sciences, in terms of their content. So Dilthey's argument was, and he wrote this in his 1883 essay, it's called Introduction to the Human Sciences. Dilthey's argument was that reality is divisible, meaning it can be divided into autonomous sectors or realms. So he says there is one section of reality which is called the human, which is called the nature, and there is another section of reality which is called the human spirit. And he says, for nature, you have one set of sciences, which is natural science. And to tackle human spirit, you have another set of sciences, which is social sciences. So natural science is for the realm of nature, and social sciences for the realm of human spirit. It's also about the inner experience and outer experience. Outer experience forms the basis for hypothetical knowledge, and that's where natural sciences come in. Inner experience discloses stuff from within, which is where you have interpretive, qualitative, thick description coming out. So that is the first thing, on the basis of subject matter, Wilhelm Dilthey. Then the other is on the basis of methods. Now here we are talking about nomothetic and idiographic. Now this is again a possible short note. Nomothetic, idiographic has been asked earlier as well. Now this is to be traced back to another important philosopher of the 19th century, Wilhelm Windelband, W-I-N-D-E-L-B-A-N-D. And Wilhelm Windelband uses these two terms, idiographic and nomothetic, for the first time in a paper that he wrote in the year 1894. It's called History and Natural Science. So these are important references. Please pen them down. History and Natural Sciences, 1894. Wilhelm Windelband talks about or refers to or mentions ideographic and nomothetic for the first time. What is nomothetic? Nomothetic is common to the natural sciences. It's about generalizing and it's about deriving laws. It seeks to discover law-like propositions. What is ideographic? Ideographic, according to Windelband, is common to the humanities and the social sciences. Ideographic is about specifying. Nomothetic, generalizing. Ideographic, specifying. It is related to understanding the unique. It is related to understanding the subjective phenomena. So in sociology, the ideographic approach focuses on the micro, whereas the nomothetic approach is used at the macro level. So it is not to say that ideographic is used in social sciences and nomothetic is used in natural sciences. That might be the case, but even in sociology, you can have two levels. One is the micro level, you have ideographic. The other is the macro level, you have nomothetic. So one could say, when we are talking about quantitative methods that use large-scale surveys, etc., we are basically conducting nomothetic research. And when we are talking about qualitative methods like ethnographic research, participant observation, etc., we are basically going ahead with ideographic research. So, but generally speaking, in sociology, we say a good research is a wonderful, well thought out, measured, coming together, a combination of both nomothetic and ideographic research or approaches. Let's quickly look at post-positivism, because there is a direct question. There's a question asked and you never know. There could be just a short note on post-positivism. Now, post-positivism is a wholesale rejection of the central tenets of positivism. It is something that is following positivism. It, of course, retains the idea that truth should be considered objective, but it also points out that our experiences of truths are necessarily imperfect because they are sort of turned better by our values and experiences. So it does not leave the researcher behind. It brings the researcher in. Post-positivists are more likely to use mixed methods and triangulation of qualitative and quantitative because they do not believe scientific method is the only method. They do not believe that scientific method is ultimately reliable, authentic, objective, etc. So they also point out the problem with this idea of objective truths, etc. And in post-positivism, an important domain of research is what we call critical realism. Critical realism. Now, critical realism is something that stands somewhere between positivism and interpretivism, right? So these are there. Then positivists are also realists, but so positivists are also realists, but post-positivists are critical realists in the sense that they realize all observation is fallible. There is no observation that is totally, altogether, completely flawless. So in other words, critical realist is critical of our ability to know reality with certainty. So the goal of science, they believe that the goal of science is to hold steadfastly to the goal of getting it right about reality. So all we need to do is constantly make sure what we are getting about reality is the right thing, even though we can never achieve that goal. So a critical realist is someone who is always into this thing called work in progress, unlike positivism, wherein it's done, it's dusted, it's over. So that is something. Then you can always think about positivism, post-positivism distinction in terms of aspects. So if you're looking at epistemological position, positivism would say objective reality exists, can be known. Post-positivism says objective reality exists, but is mediated by perceptions and interpretations. If you're looking at role of subjectivity, positivism would say ignore subjectivity. It just ignores subjectivity. But post-positivism acknowledges the influence of subjectivity. If you're looking at research focus, positivism emphasizes on empirical observations and measurement. Post-positivism combines empirical observation with qualitative insight. So it brings in mixed method. Again, in terms of quantitative versus qualitative, positivism primarily quantitative, post-positivism mixed method, triangulation. In terms of objectivity, positivism strives for objectivity and neutrality. Post-positivism aims for contextual understanding. So it simply tries to, it actually recognizes the impossibility of complete objectivity. So that's post-positivism. Then in positivism, there is role of theory. When we are there is deductive reasoning when we talk about role of theory, whereas in post-positivism there is critical realism, right? That the role of theory is there, but there is inductive reasoning, as it were. When it comes to flexibility, positivism is less flexible, but post-positivism is more pragmatic. It embraces a more pragmatic approach. So you have, if you're looking at thinkers, you have Auguste Comte, Durkheim, and to a certain extent Herbert Spencer as positivists, and you have people like Karl Popper, Thomas Kuhn, etc. as celebrated post-positivists.